Hello everyone, my name is Stephanie Sutton, editor of The Medicine Maker, and today I'm delighted to be moderating this roundtable on an incredibly important topic in the pharma industry, sustainability. Here I'll be speaking with a panel of experts from all corners of the industry about how far pharma has come and how companies can further up their environmental game, whether it's by looking at their facilities, equipment, or more. Joining me for this discussion are Peter Soelkner, Managing Director at Peutherer, Jnanadeva Bhat, Vice President and Head of R&D at ACG, Brian Peutherer, HSE Director from Sterling Pharma Solutions, and Katie Murray, Technical Director at the Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre. So first of all, I'm going to ask each member of the panel to introduce themselves and to say a little bit about what sustainability means to them. So who would like to go first? Would anyone like to volunteer?
I'm happy to go first, Stephanie.
Go for it, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation today. I'm Brian Peutherer, the HSE Director at Sterling Pharma. I'm a chemical engineer by background, and I supplemented that with a master's degree in clean technology and environmental management. So I try to link the kind of aspect of chemical manufacture, pharmaceutical manufacture with my kind of environmental niche there. Sustainability for me fits as a career, fits in really nicely with my kind of private life, if you like. So I have always had a keen interest in nature and the environment around me. I keep honeybees as a hobby. I'm a fly fisherman as a hobby, and those sorts of things both give me the time and the inclination to observe nature around me. And I have noticed personally a reduction in the biodiversity of the landscape around me, and I want to make sure that my industry does everything it can to prevent any further decline associated with industrial activities, if you like, and the challenges that we face. So I have a kind of quite a personal interest in that sense, and that's what drives me within the business to push sustainability.
Oh, fantastic. Who wants to jump in next? Peter, were you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. My name is Peter Soelkner. I'm one of the two managing directors here at Peutherer. By education, I'm a chemical engineer and MBA, and this May I'm 30 years in the industry. So at Peutherer, we fill approximately 250 million aseptically pre-filled containers, such as syringes, vials, cartridges, which are utilized for patients in need. These are usually high-end biopharmaceuticals, since we deal with the injectables market. So as you can imagine, Peutherer, together with our customers, these are usually the who is who from the pharma and biotech community. So all top 20 big pharma biotech companies, as they are listed according to their market capitalization, are on the active client list with us. We have really a keen interest to reduce our environmental footprint. And as our industry already became relatively sizable and has a huge impact on what's going on there with our CO2 footprints and other sources of pollution, I think we always had that in mind. It's not just a flavor of the month, or since it became 1-2 years, a kind of an own vogue topic. So we already look at that topic for many, many years in our company, coming from the mantra that really from a healthy environment, you can have a focus on patients as well. That goes hand in hand, it's intertwined, it's interlinked, this type of topic. And we would definitely like to contribute. So as of end of last year, we are CO2 neutral in our company. And I can tell you definitely what that means. It's not greenwashing. So we have a couple of last residuals where we buy certificates, but the vast majority is coming from year-long efforts to reduce our footprint. And I would like to share a couple of those type of key insights with you today at the roundtable.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Peter. And then next, Katie.
Yes, hi, I'm Katie Murray. I'm the Technical Director at Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre. I too am a chemical engineer by background, spent most of my career in large pharmaceutical companies, and I've been with MMIC for about 2 years now. So MMIC is a business unit of the Centre for Process Innovation, and our ambition is to accelerate the introduction of new technology into medicines manufacturing for the benefit of patients, the environment, and the UK economy. And the way we do this is through ambitious transformational projects that we call grand challenges. And in terms of sustainability for me in a manufacturing technology sense means adopting new approaches which, for example, use digital twins to reduce physical experiments, shorten supply chains, or use technology which reduces energy consumption and reduces waste. So anything in a technology sense which has a smaller carbon footprint than the current state of the art. And I think what's good about that is it generally goes hand in hand with reducing costs for the pharmaceutical companies too. So it really is a win-win, but there's that initial activation energy of the cost and the risk of the new technology that we need to get through so that then the pharma companies and patients in the environment can start reaping the benefits of these more efficient processes.
Great. And then finally, Jnanadeva.
I'm Jnanadeva Bhat. Basically, by qualification, I have done my master's in pharmacy and from the pharmaceutical background. And currently, I am heading the formulation R&D, Pharma and Nutra in ECG capsules with Pharma R&D experience. Over the 2 decades, I have worked on various dosage forms like tablet, and injectables, soft gelatin capsules, lyophilized products, and also worked on hard gelatin capsules as well. When I talk about sustainability, for us, sustainability means continuity and stability. As you know, through and through, I have worked in pharmaceutical industry and pharmaceutical R&D. We use a lot of chemicals, active ingredients, excipients, and solvents. So it is very important, that we have to look at from that angle. So it's a continuous process of living and surviving within the limits of available environmental resources in ways that, it allows the resources to thrive forever. Or if I have to simplify this, we can also say that sustainability is the process of improving the usage of resources judiciously within the capacity to support our ecosystem. So that's what I understand by sustainability.
Great. Well, thank you to all of you for those introductions. And now, as we move on with the discussions, I want to ask, why now? Why is this topic receiving so much attention? Not just in the pharma industry, but everywhere. It's really become quite a key talking point for a lot of people. So who would like to start with this one? Peter, would you like to start?
Yeah, absolutely. So what our industry leaves right now as a footprint for the environment is quite massive. I think we have to be honest with ourselves there. That we have almost an equally large footprint in the pharma and biotech industry as the automotive industry. So from that perspective, we have to take a very close look in the mirror what we can improve. And on the other hand, there have been some really good initiatives. For example, within the EU, the Green Deal, where in 2050 there should be a neutral climate. So if I look at the legislations right now in Germany, we try to achieve this goal 5 years earlier. On the other hand, we just released a new strategy in our company end of last year, which is called Peutherer Next 2029. And sustainability is really embedded in that type of strategy, which is one of the best communicated pieces within the company. What we try to develop, because you have to find new ways to balance economic performance on the one hand, but on the other hand, you have definitely a social responsibility, and you do have an ecological responsibility. And with that said, I think as a pharma and biotech industry, due to the pandemic, we came a little bit out of that kind of questionable corner, what we're doing. But when we look at that industry in 5, in 10 years from now, the time is now. The time actually started several years ago to already start first initiatives to reduce our footprint. And from our real life example, I do know that we can make really efforts and we can make an impact to drastically reduce that. And I'm absolutely on board. I think it was Stephanie who said that before. Yes, you have initial investments you have to do. It costs some money, but at the end, I think you're better off. So once you have that package complete. So I will come up with a couple of examples, what we already started, ranging from biomass, a power station, what we run with local farmers, from photovoltaics or geothermal initiatives and so forth, what you can do in order to reduce the amount of natural gas and other fossil resources you're burning, where you're sometimes between a rock and a hard place, to be in compliance with all the harsh regulatory requirements in our industry, where you have to keep, for example, 2 to 8 degrees centigrade, or where you have big ACs running and so forth. There's definitely a lot of energy consumption. The same is true when it comes to recycling materials. What do you use? What do you discuss in the first place with your customers? I think we will come back to that later on in our roundtable, but just to give you an idea why now, I think everybody has now a certain awareness and there's a consciousness towards the environment, what we have to utilize, again, to get really the environment, your economic performance, and your social responsibility in balance.
And then how about you, Katie? Would you like to give your thoughts next?
I agree with everything Peter said. Just to add a little bit to it, I think events like the global COP26 climate change conference have increased awareness recently too. And I think there's that increasing sense of urgency that we actually need to do something now instead of keep talking about it. And I think the fact that many of the large pharma companies, as Peter just illustrated, have now actually set out those bold targets for net zero carbon ambition and are actually committed to achieving them and are demonstrating that they can do it. I think that is going to bring the rest of the industry along as well. So I think it's all really, really positive now. I do think there's been in the last year or two, a shift from talking about it to actually doing it.
Absolutely. And then any other thoughts? Brian or Jnanadeva, would either of you like to speak?
Yeah, I think just to pick up on what both folks have said before now, you know, that growing public interest, I think, is there as well. So yes, there are a number of, if you like, industry and national and government initiatives there, but with respect to public interest as well, then, you know, in industries and governing bodies will see a little bit more pressure and a little bit more challenge. They are ultimately consumers of our materials, and therefore the consumer has that power. So I think there's a much better educated public out there in terms of the potential issues around sustainability and climate change. And I think that also then transcribes into the investment side of our businesses as well. So we certainly see a lot more drivers in the industry through investors in terms of good corporate social responsibility, good environment, sustainable and governance, in terms of, you know, where are they going to put the money, and obviously as businesses that are looking to grow, we're looking for finance to enable that to happen, and therefore, you know, that sustainability pressure comes also through, you know, through our investors, which is right and good, and that is causing the industry to sit up and make some changes, and certainly to pick up on what Katie said as well, you know, the time is now. I think that there's definitely that recognition that we need to do something, not just talk about it.
And then Jnanadeva, do you have something to add to this?
Yes, I think, Ms. Katie has already touched upon on the pharmaceutical industry and what they are doing. I think it is important, for us to understand why pharmaceutical industry, because, as I indicated earlier, pharmaceutical industry deals with chemicals and solvents, water, and everything. So, compared to any other industry, I think it is very important for pharmaceutical industry and all other sectors as well to really focus on sustainability at this point of time. Looking at whether how waste is being managed, and how we can recycle the materials, and how can we think about greenhouse gases. So I think it is important for us to look at from all the angles, more so with the pharmaceutical industry.
And then obviously, now that this topic is getting a lot more interest in the industry, there are a lot of initiatives coming out. Like we said, there's a lot of big pharma companies paying attention to this, and lots of other things happening as well. So I want to ask, what initiatives have you all seen that have caught your eye, either at your own companies or elsewhere in the industry? What inspiring things are happening across the industry? And who'd like to jump in with this one? Peter, over to you again.
I could, yeah, certainly. So there had been global sustainability development goals from the United Nations out there, and there are 17 of those sustainable development goals, and that had been part of our guiding star, lack of a better term, how we developed our own program and further develop such program. I think we are all aware of the Paris Climate Agreement, where I think 196 nations had been present, and 189 nations already ratified that within their governments and so forth. And I'm pretty happy. So I used to live 14 years in the United States, returned to Europe last year, so that finally the US came back on board with the Paris Climate Initiative, that we should really limit global warming by 1.5 degrees centigrade there, and reduce really our gas emissions and the greenhouse effects by 45% in comparison to 2010. On the other hand, for us, we are a global business. So we, as I mentioned before, we manufacture high-end biopharmaceuticals and fill them into containers and ship them globally for the who's who in pharma biotech. And certainly with all the ingredients, materials and everything what we do need, we paid some attention here to the Pharmaceutical Supply Chain Initiative. So it's the acronym is PSCI. And certainly that has relatively high demands, how you run your supply chain, but that definitely matters. And we look into all of those initiatives to derive from those requirements our own policies and what we can do better. And on the other hand, it's not only policies. I'm not a big fan just of really creating laws and you have to obey by them. It's really kind of a mind change. It has to be in the DNA of your company, and it starts with all the little things people can contribute on a daily basis in the company. But it's really becoming a mindset. On the other hand, looking on the big initiatives, I think that's pretty much it. What we are following as it's at this point in time, and it is challenging, but it can be done.
Stephanie, I could talk about a few of the sort of technology initiatives we're currently looking at in the Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre, which are these technologies which will reduce waste, reduced energy, etc. So one of them is to use a continuous direct compression technology for making tablets instead of the current state-of-the-art processes, which typically use a granulation step, which is means you have to add add more energy into the process. Either you can do it dry or you can do it wet, in which case you add water and then you have to remove the water. But either way, by using this direct compression approach in a continuous mode, you can go to a much smaller footprint of equipment, but also a much smaller energy consuming process. And we're also applying a digital twin to that system as well, so that when you're in that process development stage, instead of doing all your experiments in reality, you can do a lot of them virtually really quickly and not using any materials, energy, people, time, etc. And so you really reduce significantly that burden in the development stage as well. We're also looking at a digital quality dashboard. So at the moment, batch release of final product for medicines is a process that can take many weeks. Because typically a qualified person has to go and find information from lots of different systems. So we're working on a digital approach where all of that information would be held in one place. And so it would dramatically speed up that batch release process, which then shortens the supply chain significantly and would lead to a lot less waste. I'm also interested, I've seen quite a bit recently about using machine learning directed robots, which could interface with automated equipment that already exists, say for process development, could be the process piece and the analytical, so that the robot can actually work between those two automated systems to run experiments, to look at the results, define what the next set of experiments should be, and actually do that whole process a lot more quickly and efficiently than using humans who have to go home and sleep and eat and boring things like that. So I think that that robot piece interfaced with already existing automated systems could be really powerful in the future, and apply that machine learning piece on top of it, so that you're building up this database and using all that information of all the previous experiments that have been run. So you're not starting from scratch all the time. Could again lead to a lot more savings. And I think another area we're looking at is how to run the facility more efficiently. So we're exploring with a company some smart technology for how you control the airflow rate into your clean rooms. So at the moment, it tends to be a fixed number of air change rates, regardless of what's going on in the room. And it's designed to cope with the maximum load you would expect, which is typically people going in and out and moving around rooms, generating particles. So this technology looks at, well, let's count the number of particles and then use that to control how much air we need to put through the clean room, rather than just having a blanket number regardless of what's going on. So that again will lead to big savings in energy, because you're not having to condition and pump through lots of air that isn't really required.
Yeah.
How about you?
I would like to add, if I have to add a few more points to this, the most important, from the industry perspective is packaging materials, where if we can try and use biodegradable primary packing material in the pharmaceutical industry, that would be a very good initiative. And also, pharmaceutical industry or any industry, the waste management, especially the liquid waste management, where, switching over or implementing zero liquid discharge will be a very strategic move, which can definitely add on to the sustainability. And one more thing I would like to add is, the great initiative by most of the leading pharmaceutical industry is, switching over to a dry powder inhalers, capsules-based dry powder inhalers, as against HFA-based propellant, which again can cause greenhouse gases. So I think that is a good initiative where, the gases can be reduced, the solvents can be reduced by implementing capsule-based dry powder inhalers. That is a one good initiative which has been, taken place by many of the leading pharmaceutical industry.
Stephanie, I think my colleagues have done a good job there in summarizing a number of challenges and opportunities around that. And I think just to sum up some of that, obviously when you look at your own business, wherever your business is, you'll generally identify things, and summarizing some of the topics, the supply chain, big impact in terms of what happens, energy consumption, huge impact in terms of what happens, and then also picking up on, the waste streams and management of those. And I think any organization needs to look at itself and identify what sorts of initiatives would suit it best. And we've done a similar exercise at Sterling recently. We're an API manufacturer, handling a lot of organic solvents and organic chemicals, a lot of aqueous materials through there. And the pharmaceutical active ingredient manufacture does create a reasonable amount of waste. That's how it happens. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about green chemistry concepts as well later on in the discussion to improve that side of things. But within our business, we looked at ourselves and we said, yeah, okay, some of our challenges are around energy, are around waste. So the kind of one of the initiatives that we've looked at most recently and are implementing now is the use of anaerobic digestion in order to take more of our very heavily organic contaminated water waste streams and even potentially some pure solvent streams and treat those using anaerobic digestion in order to create a biogas, a biomethane, and then inject that back into the national grid. So providing a feedstock, a fuel stock from waste material, managing our liquid waste disposal, helping with our energy management challenges. So it's opportunities like that which actually will, if you like, tick a number of boxes in terms of the sustainability challenges that an organization has, and by doing one investment in a particular project actually tackle 3 or 4 of the sites problems and opportunities. And that happens across the industry a number of places, but like you say, there are very often themes in most particularly for my industry and our business, waste management, energy management, and the sort of supply chain side of things. They're the 3 biggest contributors to our, if you like, the carbon footprint, and those are the things that we need to look at initiatives to tackle.
Yeah, and when you all identify these opportunities and these challenges, what are the difficulties of actually doing something about it and being more sustainable? And Peter, I think earlier you were talking about, you've got to balance, I guess, the cost versus the benefits. So what are your thoughts on the challenges?
Yeah, there are definitely challenges. As already indicated before, we have to comply with a whole array of regulatory requirements. So where we cannot allow ourselves that even for a second we take a certain laminar flow out of operations while filling aseptic containers / syringes for patients around the world. And in that supply chain, we have to keep 2 to 8 degrees centigrade as a temperature controlled environment to get that medication safely on a global basis to the distribution centers, and then later on our customers get it to the patients and so forth. So it is not completely avoidable with all of those cornerstones that you say, okay, fine, I can avoid everything. But once we dug a little deeper already a couple of years ago, we said, okay, fine. With our new logistics site and center of visual inspection as one example, and our manufacturing sites, we looked into photovoltaic, geothermal energy. On the other hand, where we had to buy energy, we look into hydropower. We are relatively close to the Alps here with our corporate headquarters. So in Austria, just across the borderline, there are several initiatives where you look into hydropower, and which doesn't have the same footprint, since they use the elevation of natural water, just propelling turbines and so forth. So we support these type of projects. On the other hand, we looked into recycling of materials as well. A lot can be done. How much papers do you really print? We have heard that before. We are looking into electronic batch recording as well. So it speeds up our whole operation. And on the other hand, up to now, so we're just at the brink to do that for the aseptic processes as well. So a batch of syringes, let's say 100,000 syringes, comes with a paperwork between 1,000 and 1,500 pieces of paper. That's the documentation, what you put on top of that. And you can imagine if you do several thousand batches a year and so forth, there's a lot of forest involved, and a lot of production processes. So we can find those concepts. There are other concepts where you cannot compromise, where you cannot recycle, in particular, where active product ingredients we utilize for the clients have touched certain materials. This is sometimes special waste where you have to take care of that, and you cannot just bring it back into a normal recycling, how you recycle plastics and so forth. So other than that, it will be really dangerous for people if some trace amounts of particularly oncology products, for example, would be involved. So one can imagine that we really have to separate that and pick our battles. That's where we certainly see a couple of limitations. And right now we are looking into better wastewater management. So that had been mentioned here at the roundtable already. What can be done in that direction, and really look into wind, solar, biogas initiatives, and so forth. And just under the current impressions, unfortunately, we are under these current impressions of the last months. What happened in the Ukraine? Let's face it, that is something what really should speed up the process, where we do something good for ourselves to become relatively quickly independent from these type of gas sources, and not just transported crisscross the ocean and what other initiatives there might be. Can we avoid it from one day to the other? Probably not, but to work towards that goal, to look into more sustainable energies and to buy those sustainable energies, even though it might be at a certain point a little bit more expensive. So what had been expensive a month ago is now really the key to go, since our gas prices for natural gas went through the roof. It's almost 200% in cost elevations and inflation rate driving certain things. So with that said, I think if somebody need to be convinced just from an economic perspective, the time is now to rethink.
Stephanie, I could build on some of the points Peter made too. He talked about the regulatory challenges of changing some of the ways you supply systems in your supply chain and energy, etc. I think where I'm more focused is more on the process as well. And I think as you start to look at different ways to process the medicine to actually manufacture it, then you start to raise a lot of questions about, are you potentially changing the quality of the final product? And it might not be better or worse necessarily, but even if it's different, if you're using a different process and you get a different impurity profile out the other end, that starts to raise questions in a regulatory sense. And so you have to be able to justify why, even though it looks a bit different, it's still good. And it's not necessarily going to be the same as what you were making with the other manufacturing techniques. And so there's a challenge there, and it takes quite a lot of time and a lot of data and a lot of confidence to switch from one process to another for an already established product. I think it's easier when products are in development, but there's still that element in project teams of, oh, this is higher risk because it's not what we're used to doing. So yeah, it's great in concept, but just don't do it on my product, thanks. Do it on another one. So yeah, there is always that element of risk. And so what we need to do is build up the confidence in these new technologies and support the project teams that are introducing them through that journey, recognizing it will be a journey, and work together with the regulators as well, so that we're aligned on what we're trying to do, and they work with us to find solutions rather than just say, well, it's different than what we saw before, so we don't like it.
I think just picking up on that theme, Stephanie, if I may, that concept that Katie brings is very important. I think in the pharmaceutical world, that the regulatory regime is essentially averse to change in that sense, because it brings challenges, it brings costs, it brings risk potentially, and all of that has to be managed. And I think one of the biggest things for the pharmaceutical industry to that kind of holds it back, I suppose, is that fear of breaking away from the status quo. We've always done it this way. Batch chemistry's always been like this. Formulation's always been like that. There's a lot of different areas which provide challenge, but in each of those areas we need to break away from that status quo. And I love the point there about, you know, try the change on somebody else's product. You know, we're a contract manufacturing organization. We have a large number of customers across the space, from preclinical works through the clinical trial phases, through commercial stages, and at each different stage there are opportunities for both regulatory risk management and also sustainability risk management. But the funding and the support at each stage of the pharmaceutical API manufacturing sequence does change. The appetite for that is different. And one of our jobs as a business is to try and encourage, you know, a really good process. We talked briefly about green chemistry. So, you know, can we design the chemical processes at the early phases of the pharmaceutical life cycle such that when they do hopefully become successful and commercial and scaled up, that we're not scaling up something that is an inefficient and an unsustainable way of working. To do that, we need the buy-in of our customers, and those customers again range from, you know, new novel chemistry organizations, new technical organizations, right through to big pharmaceutical customers. All of those have a very different appetite for how they do things. So as a contract manufacturer, our job and our challenge is to push our requirements for more sustainable operations up and out towards our customers and get them to buy into the spirit of that as well. And also we need to cascade down through the supply chain, the other side of things. So those people who are feeding us with materials, to make sure that they are as efficient and sustainable as they can be. So that puts us in a little bit of a tricky position as a contract manufacturer, but I think as an industry, if the whole industry comes together, then that enables all of those different players across the very wide spectrum of pharmaceutical manufacture. Everybody's got that same aim in mind. So we really do need to try and understand how we can and work together to break out of the status quo that is pharmaceutical manufacture.
A lot of really excellent points raised so far. And Jnanadeva, do you have anything you'd like to add on the challenges side before we move on?
I think all panel members have already, you know, touched upon the points on regulatory and legal aspects, waste management, and the supply chain related challenges. So, you know, lastly, Brian has already, you know, given us from the pharmaceutical how, you know, things are happening and what need to be done. So I think, you know, almost all points have been covered. Nothing to add.
The next question then. What key areas do you think companies should focus on to help reduce the pharma's industry's environmental impact, and where should priorities lie? And importantly, what different actions can different companies take? Because you're all from different backgrounds, different types of companies. So I think it's interesting to see what different actions you can all take. And hopefully, you know, people listening to this can then take some points away to apply in their own companies. To start with this one, Jnanadeva, do you want to go first?
Yes. You know, the most important is from the pharmaceutical, as you know, we have already discussed, you know, throughout the discussion on the waste management and other things at length. So the most important, you know, what we are also looking at is, you know, wherever possible, we are trying to do automation and continuous manufacturing, so that by this way, you know, we believe that we can definitely reduce the waste at every stages. And also to manage that, you know, will be very easier for us. So I think that is one important action which, you know, we have initiated. And I think, you know, every pharmaceutical industry also looking at continuous manufacturing, because that will definitely increase the productivity, and also, you know, the manufacturing can be managed well. So I think that is one important factor. And also from the technical aspects, if we look at, you know, we have to look at the efficiency improvement throughout. by whatever the means, maybe by automation, maybe by improving the efficiency by consolidating the resources, and also from the development perspective, pharmaceutical product development perspective. So at all stages, consolidating can definitely help in improving the efficiency at all levels. That's what probably the one important thing, and the most important thing which is slightly tricky and difficult for the pharmaceutical industry is managing the antibiotics, because it's always required to be handled, and also the anti-cancer kind of products. So handling that is the biggest challenges. Even at this point of time, I think somewhere there, a lot of improvement needs to be taken place, and action needs to be taken by pharmaceutical industry. So, this is where I would like to add to this point.
Really, so again, some great points raised, and obviously we've discussed a lot throughout about what companies can do and what the priorities can be. Katie, what else do you have to add to this?
Well, I guess I want to point to that. So science is bringing manufacturing challenges. So there have been quite a few developments in recent years in ever increasing complexity of molecules. So things like the antibody drug conjugates, that now you've got a small molecule, you've got a very, very toxic piece there, you've got a linker molecule, you've got an antibody as well. So you've got increasing complexity, which brings with it more and more manufacturing steps that are going to lead to a higher carbon footprint. And so I guess there's a bit of a challenge there about how complex do we want our medicines to be? I mean, they're allowing us to treat ever more challenging diseases, which is fantastic. And we're all, at the end of the day, humans who want to have as many treatments for as many diseases that we might possibly get in the future, and our families and friends as well down the line. But I think we also have to accept that that will bring with it more carbon footprint challenges from a manufacturing perspective. But equally then, if we look at a more of a whole life cycle and patient pathway approach, the fact that we can treat patients with much more effective medicines in an overall sense of the carbon footprint of a patient and the patient journey could be a lot lower. So I think there's that holistic view we need to take a look at, rather than just only focusing on the manufacturing. Take everything Jnanadeva said, I completely agree with that around efficiency and what we can do. But I think also there's biology may come out the other side, and there's self-amplifying RNA approaches now, where if the more potent the medicine that you can make is, and the more you can get the body to amplify the RNA to make the treatment itself, then the smaller and smaller quantities of medicine you're making, and therefore the smaller carbon footprint that the manufacturing piece will have. So I think there's some interesting challenges there, and where the correct balance is, I'm not really sure, but just thought I would toss that in. I think also, in terms of what can we do in the supply chain sense, medicines, even the simple medicines, can have extremely complex and long supply chains. And the ownership of that supply chain changes as you go along it. And so the pharma companies themselves own a piece in the middle, but there's a big piece of raw materials, crude API, excipient supplies up front, and could be the manufacturing piece as well. And then there's a whole distribution, and then there's the patient prescribing, and what you do with the medicines at end of life, disposal, etc. So is it that whole supply chain you need to look at, and who do you hold accountable? Because if you try and look at every single node in that supply chain, it's incredibly complex, and actually you get people involved in part of it as well, because you can't control how efficiently patients take their medicines and dispose of them, etc. So yeah, but I think the more connected you can make the big carbon footprint parts of that supply chain, the more visibility across them that there is, the easier it will be to increase the efficiency and therefore reduce the waste. So at the moment, it's extremely difficult for a CMO, a contract manufacturing organization, to electronically communicate with a big pharma customer, for example, and so you don't have that visibility across the supply chain. So you have to make some guesses about how long is it going to take to get the material delivered, and then you build in contingency on contingency, and that all translates into unnecessary carbon footprint. So the better job we can do to connect those supply chains and make them as efficient as possible, I think there'll be a big benefit there.
Brian, do you have anything to add to this one?
I think the key thing really is around summarizing, you know, so we've got a diverse portfolio here across the industry in terms of where people are represented. I think the most important thing from my point of view that companies should focus on is firstly measure, you know, what you're doing. What gets measured gets managed. And that's a very old adage, but it's very true in the world of sustainability. So you know, it sounds like everybody on this panel has engaged in that and moved forward, but some folks aren't there yet. So, you know, some people do need to make sure they're measuring the right things. Picking up on what Peter said earlier, you've then got to make that part of your culture, you know, to drive the business culture and also individuals within that business, to build it into your kind of company values, to engage people, to have those people drive and push the everyday work that moves towards improvements. You've obviously got to make some investments after you've measured and make investments in the things that will have a big impact. So, you know, I've mentioned, you know, energy and waste from our point of view, very, very important, and supply chain as well. So I think when, you know, once companies, whatever suits them, invest in something big and actually deliver it. You know, that was really encouraging to hear Peter talk about, you know, his business looking to be, you know, he's carbon zero, practically carbon zero already. You know, that is great, and other companies need to follow suit on that. So it's all about that. It's the same as every other business priority. Measure it, work out what you do, build the culture, make the change, and that is what businesses need to do, whichever sector you're in.
Yeah, so maybe to add to that question, I think it already becomes a prerequisite that we, as a CDMO, that's now from the CDMO perspective, that you move towards a more environmental, better footprint and so forth. Because the big pharma companies, the bigger biotech companies, in the last couple of years, they definitely have adapted and bought into that concept. So as a supplier to this industry, you get a lot of audits already, environmental health and safety audits, for example, and where you have to be in compliance, to be in good standing, and to be a qualified vendor. Just from a pure economical perspective, if you want to serve that market long term, you have to comply and you have to do something about it. So that's one side. On the other hand, what Katie mentioned is kind of an interesting aspect when you look into modern medication and how medication might evolve in the last decade. So we all talk about that kind of third wave of biotech, individualized medication. You go down really to the DNA of things, and with that said, you have even smaller patient populations. And every patient, worst case, would need an own little fermenter, an own little filling equipment, and so forth. And we really have to ask ourselves, how we come up with intelligent ways with the entire manufacturing process as well. So I used to work for an equipment supplier in my previous life, selling filters, gamma irradiable bags, tubing systems, laboratory equipment, and so forth. And there was a certain trend. If you would have asked that question 15 years ago, they would have said, no, everything will be kind of single use, that we go into that decade of single use. So in the meantime, what you find in processes is that you have a lot of hybrids where you utilize some of that technology, where it really speeds up your process, how quickly you can get medication to patients. On the other hand, there are certainly people going back to fermenters, which are all of a sudden in stainless steel again. It's entirely possible. It's the same with our compounding containers, where we do have dedicated equipment for every single drug, but it will utilize again and again before you go to massive amount of backlining systems and 3D containers and what have you. So that is a question as well, what you have to keep in balance, as well as how do you clean your stainless steel containers versus the plastic and so forth. But you have to look into this entire production process, what you do, and make those conscious decisions together with your customers, because it's their product. And with that said, you have to be in line as a CDMO, what you can do with a particular molecule or a product you try to fill into a syringe, for example. So that is certainly a question one has to ask. And on the other hand, I think there is really an impetus on that responsibility. We have towards the planet, towards society, and it's growing in that industry. It's good to see that. And with that awareness, I think we look under every rock and stone in the meantime to address those challenges, what Brian said before, and Katie and so forth. So, yeah.
Oh, wonderful. I think throughout the discussion, we've covered a lot of points. And I think the exciting thing with sustainability is that there's a lot of different things that companies can do. If they can't invest on the continuous manufacturing side or the equipment, maybe there's smaller things that they can do. So there is always something that every company can do to help the planet and help the environment, and ultimately patients as well, because that's what it comes down to: healthy planets, healthy patients. Now, as we come to the end of the discussion, I want to just ask each of you for your closing thoughts. Any final comments or suggestions or anything you'd like to share with people watching this?
I think you mentioned a great point. There are sometimes smaller companies that cannot invest into the big programs. But for example, when it comes to mobility, how are your employees coming to work? But for example, a big bicycle program, it's actually incentivized by the state, where they can buy new bicycles upfront before taxes, and that saves them a big deal. And so during the pandemic, so with public transportation being questionable to hop into a bus, for example, out of 5,700 employees, more than 2,000 embarked on new bicycles here within the last 2 years. It's kind of interesting to see that. And what we have done here with our new office building, so with roughly 1,000 folks who work in offices, what we have adapted to is that everybody cleans his or her own waste bin. So it's not really somebody who's cleaning up for you and emptying that on a daily basis. You sort it out and you bring it to the respective containers where we all collect the waste, including myself. Yeah. So, and I think that drives a certain awareness. We have motion detectors, for example. So when you forget to shut off your light, okay, technology will do that for you. And it's really on the little things on a daily basis, which drives a different mindset, a different DNA in the entire company. So with that said, so I hope that we all move into that direction, that pharma and biotech really learned in the last couple of years that it really matters, that we are definitely one of the companies who can make a huge difference and have already a big impact on the environment, that we help to drive it. And I found this discussion really, really good. And it was good to see that from different perspectives, different companies, we all have the same goal in mind. So thank you very much for that. And yeah.
And then next, Jnanadeva.
Yes, I would like to touch upon one particular point, which, I think every pharmaceutical industry needs to be looked at is, the unused medicines at the patient's end or the consumer's end. How are, those going to be treated or disposed? or how it can be handled. I think this is one of the important factor. I think I think somewhere someone has to take some kind of initiative in managing that particular aspect. So having said that, from the ACG's point of view, at the heart of ACG, there is a simple vision, we have to help make the world healthier, happier, and ultimately a better place. So, and to help all these, we partner with all pharmaceutical industries to do the same. And also, looking at our suppliers as well to, look at from the audit point of view or from the supply point of view. And from the ACG's perspective, we are, already initiated, many aspects like solar energy, to control the greenhouse gases, and ZLD, zero liquid discharge, automation. So all possible ways, we are at ACG are looking at all these aspects from the sustainable point of view. And at the end of the, I think, I also would like to thank, everyone, because a lot of insights have come from everyone on this particular, topic. I think, a lot of, new initiatives, and happy that everybody is, thinking in the similar lines on the sustainability point. Thank you.
And then Brian, how about you? Final comments?
Yeah, I think again, great diversity in the discussion, a vast wealth of different businesses in the sector, and I think from a sustainability point of view, the key thing is that all business leaders need to call on their organizations and work out what is the right thing for my business to do, and what is that based on. Hopefully good sound measurements. Then you go through the management piece, manage your energy, manage your waste, manage your supply chain, encourage your people and the behaviors of your people. All of that, any organization can do, doesn't matter on the size. And a final word really is to do something, and to do it now, because we are really running out of time in terms of the global challenges that have been set for industry and governments. And the sooner you start doing something, the sooner it starts to improve. So I think that's the key thing. Everybody's at a different stage on the journey, but do something, do it now.
And then last, but certainly not least, Katie, over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think at some point we're probably going to need to move to a place where sustainability targets sort of become a license to operate, and therefore there's requirements to meet them. And I think working together across the supply chain for medicines will be really important. It was really good to hear what Peter said, that there's already that interplay between the pharma companies and the CMOs in terms of setting those expectations. I think there has to be a realization too, it's going to cost more, at least in the short term, and we really want to make sure that we don't penalize the CMOs that are making huge efforts in this area, but therefore probably cost a little bit more than other suppliers who might not be putting in so much effort. So I think having a collaborative, combined approach, recognizing where the challenges are, but also setting expectations between the different nodes in the supply chain will be really important. And yeah, I really enjoyed the discussion too. Thank you very much for everybody. Very interesting.
Well, thank you to all of you for taking the time to take part in this and give so many interesting points that I really hope are going to resonate with people who are watching this. So thank you again to all of you for taking part, and thank you to everyone for watching.